Welcome to the Blue Hour. Every week, two old pals get together and chat about innovative stuff. I'm Eric. This is Charlie. Today, we're going to talk about some news coming out of Apple this week, information about Llama raising money, and then product hunt and stuff that we've been researching. But I'll kick it off with Apple Vision Pro. So, do you know if Apple does this event only once a year, right?
So I used to watch these in high school. I went to a high school that you required you have a Mac, and so I remember buying a Mac when I was like 15 or 14 with caddy money that I had made over the summer. Um, so I vividly remember it was an iBook G4. If you guys look that up, it's kind of cool. I still have that computer. Um, but yeah, they do these actually. It depends on the year. They usually don't do them quarterly. They usually do them like these keynotes. They're like either they can be quarterly, they can be biannually, or they can be once a year. But they're usually more than once a year, and it's usually like around big product launches. And so if they have like the Apple Watch when that comes out, and that's a different year staggered from the MacBook Air, those would be different events. But usually they're like sort of built in together, and then they usually do one at least a year for, or maybe every other year, depends on how often the OS has come out. But like when the different like when I forget what the old ones were. It was like Maverick was one of the OSs that they had launched, and those are usually like 2 hours of just a really deep dive into all the functionality of the softwares.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah. Well, they did one of those. And the big thing, it was like kind of
Yeah,
leaked beforehand that they were going to come out with their headset, which is that people were like thinking it was going to be VR. They released it. It's called the Apple Vision Pro, which is a mix of like AR augmented reality, which takes you can actually see your surroundings, but it puts things into it, and then VR, which is like you're fully enveloped in this thing. And it was fascinating and interesting, and it seemed a little different than a lot. I mean, I don't personally own any VR headsets, and I've never gotten into it. But after watching it, I was interested in this one for sure. Uh, things that I thought
why?
were, yeah, the thing that I think is cool is it's basically like a digital computer, so you can use it as a digital computer. And I could be wearing the stupid dumb headset, but look up and have like a bunch of different browser screens, and then have like a little trackpad and a keyboard at my hands and do work with my head looking straight ahead with these huge screens that I could customize. Like I think that's a cool experience, and I kind of like that better that because I work. I'm not really like a monitor guy, so I have just like a tiny little laptop. It seemed like cool
Yeah,
enough to test out and a cool way to like watch videos. I watch a good bit of YouTube, and you can do cool things like make the screen huge. They have this like VR feature where if you're looking at your screen like normally you'd see the room around you, but you can add in an environment. So this is called the blue hour, but my favorite time of day is the blue hour, and you could like turn into the blue hour while you're working, which for me seems fun to like really lock in for an hour, do work, and it feels like I'm in my favorite part of the day. Um,
yeah,
so there's two
that's
things.
cool. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I like the idea that makes me think about a lot of the time when I'm struggling with focusing on things. I have this app on my computer that counts. It's a timer and it counts down different increments of minutes. It's like based on some efficiency guru. I have no idea, but
Pomodoro technique.
what'd you say?
Pomodoro technique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't really actually know anything about that, but I know that this is in reference to that, and it's just a timer to me. In the same way that you had showed me a couple weeks ago, you got those hourglasses that you flip up and down. This is effectively the same thing for me, and it makes a little ding when it's done. And that way, I can just like stay focused on something for 25 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes or a little bit more sometimes. And I can imagine that this you could use similarly. So you could build something on top of this. I'm not sure that they're going to do it, but like maybe if there's some sort of app store component that allows for it feels as though all of the app store, all of the existing sort of UI UX, when you watch somebody play with, they have like their different screens in the same way that I can use Expose to check out my different screens. So you
Yeah.
could use something like that, and you could hopefully have a plugin or some sort of add-on that allows for you to have a countdown timer with that self like that like deprecation of like sensory deprecation. So allow for you to like block everything out. That to me seems awesome because even when I have that little timer on, I still find myself like, looking around and hanging out. But it'd be really fun if I could just sort of like put myself in a little deprecation chamber for 30 minutes and
Yeah.
really focus.
Yeah.
That's cool. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. I like that for work. I mean, it is like most people. first reaction is that this is going to change. Like people already don't leave the house enough, and we're gonna create this like dystopian society where everybody stays in their homes and they just like put on their little headset and that's where their entire life is. It's possible, but if you do that, you're not very chill, and I'm not super worried about you.
Exactly. I was talking to somebody earlier about this in reference to, yeah, pretty much exactly that. And it's like, there are already people who play video games all day. There are already people who kind of like are hermits and do nothing all day. I don't care. Like that's fine. Like the less traffic, the better. Less people out surfing, the better. Less people congesting the golf course, the better. Like I don't really care. Whatever. If that's what you're into, good for you. I don't know. I don't really see that as an issue. It's like a non-issue for me. It seems like something that people without actual worries worry about.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like I'm worried about what everybody else is going to do. Just control yourself. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
a headset's never be better than going on a bike ride in the morning or, going.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be fun, but it's not going to be that. And if you stop doing those things, that's on you.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I don't necessarily think of it as dystopian. I think of it as being actually really cool, or like potentially really cool. But honestly, it's way out of my price range. I would never spend $3,500 on anything like this. Like it just seems way too expensive to me. I guess their justification is that it's replacing your computer. But for me, I've wanted an iMac I've been waiting to get an iMac for a very long time. I've always wanted an iMac, really. And it's like, I'm going to get one at some point, just so I have like a dedicated work area. Maybe I'll end up getting this instead if it takes me long enough. But like, even an iMac is a lot less than this.
Yeah.
An iMac brand new with all the specs that I want is like $1,700, probably a little bit less maybe now. And if you get it, especially if you get it like an older version, and so I don't see myself spending $3,500 on this anytime soon. There's no way.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to sell my body to do it. Otherwise, I have to build something that's dope. I mean,
Yeah.
we're in a weird world now. You never know. We could fucking YouTube ad money, dude.
Yeah, true. I don't honestly, I don't know that I would prioritize something like this. Like when I think of $3,500, I think of all the other things. Like golf clubs are so expensive. I spent like $1,200 at the end of last season to buy all new stuff, and this is 2 sets of brand new golf clubs, or like this is like 5 surfboards, or this is like this is like a bunch of things that I can actually want, and it just like it's just way too much for one thing. And maybe it's sick, but ultimately, if there's one thing I know, I didn't buy the Apple Watch the first year it came out, right? I waited like till Apple Watch 4 to buy it because I wanted for some of the bugs to be out, and so I'll probably, I don't know that I'll necessarily buy one of these just because we already wear specs. And so the idea that I'd put like a headset on to me is very weird. A good friend of ours from college works at a VR headset company. Their main client, they're actually Asian based. Because I don't know how to bleep out words. I'm not going to say his name, but you might know who I'm talking about. You definitely know who he is.
Yeah,
he's from. Yeah. Okay. Good. But yeah, so he
has to bleep it out.
Yeah, I don't know how to bleep it out. I'm not going to even do that. But he's been working there for, I don't know, 5-6 years now, and they sell mostly to the Air Force. I know that they do a lot of government contracts that they can actually have like VR simulations of flights, and so that's their main client, which is really interesting. So I've never put one of those on. I know that he had sort of like brought them over once, and we had like, I guess maybe I put one on then, but it was a long time ago. I remember it was like 5 or 6 years ago. But this just seems like I don't know. I don't know. I'm not like super thrilled about it. I'm glad you wanted to talk about it. Honestly, I wouldn't have thought to talk about this today had you not brought it up.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it, dude.
That's cool. I'm glad you are.
We'll see what happens. But yeah, let's slide by it. Let's talk about Llama. Llama?
Yeah, I mean,
you know more about
Llama, baby. Yeah, so LlamaIndex is really, they just announced yesterday, or maybe this morning, that they raised some money. And so this is really quick. Ultimately, we had spoken last week in passing about, or not in passing, we've spoken a little bit in depth about it, but Hugging Face partnering with IBM, which is a huge strategic, like Hugging Face is an open source platform that's raised a lot of money. And LlamaIndex is similar, but their mission and the product they have is different. So Happy Face is almost like a GitHub for a lot of LLMs, and LlamaIndex is one of those LLMs. And so ultimately, they're like, like to give you a spiel on them, I had done some research before, but like they became a critical data orchestration component in the LLM software landscape, providing a framework for QA systems and chatbots. And so like they've just, in terms of the open source people who are building chatbots in those QA systems, this is one of the ones that's used the most. And they just secured $8.5 million in seed funding. So it's really early there. Seed funding, 8.5 million is nothing to scoff at. It's pretty legit. They just written this article this week. I thought that was cool. It's cool to see that there are relatively small projects, even though there might be a lot of users. Like this isn't a huge team of people, and to raise 8.5 million in a seed round is like, maybe it doesn't sound like that much, but it is kind of a lot for such a small team, especially in such like a new space before a Series A. We've both worked at Series A, B. We've been there for raises for different organizations, and we've seen the growth that happens at some of those. And we've been at companies that have raised significantly more, but nowhere I've worked has raised this much in a seed round. So it's cool to see the way that like capital is being allocated by VCs toward AI. Like there's a lot of AI trash, and a lot of people are like, AI is the new crypto, and like, but this is actually legit. I thought that this was kind of worth highlighting, just because this is a significant amount of money, and it's a relatively small team.
So an open source LLM, like maybe for people who aren't familiar, how would you describe an LLM? Like I don't really go into much more research outside of OpenAI, but I know it's basically the infrastructure that a chat GPT is built on top of that gives people the ability to build cool things. But
Exactly.
yeah. And is that basically what they're doing? They're just open sourcing the infrastructure, meaning anybody can see it and use it if they want and build their own version of it. And yeah.
Exactly. I think that they're kind of agnostic, when it comes to something like OpenAI and you want to leverage that and build on top of it, you're kind of subject to the fact that they are providing an API right now. They provide you with certain costs that are not really negotiable because it's all interacted through an API. You're not like working with an account manager who you're negotiating annual costs with. You're working with an API based on the amount of somebody had made an analogy that it's like a bouncer at a door, like in order to go through the door, you need to talk to the bouncer, you need to exchange some cash. But ultimately it's $5 every single time. And so there's not like this inundation of data. It's always coming through this one door with the API. It's relatively simple. Whereas with LlamaIndex, it's much larger scope. And so they're working with many different frameworks, like different data frameworks for different LLM applications. So they feature it's the breadth of it is much, much larger. So it's like data management, data querying, and then it integrates a big part of this announcement is that they're going to be integrating not only with individual data, but also enterprise data. They're using that data to interact with LLM applications and offer extensive integrations with other storage providers and downstream applications. So like they have 100 plus data loaders and 13 plus vector database providers. And so they're just allowing for there's this main player with OpenAI who was given $100 million, right? By Microsoft. $100 billion.
10 billion.
Stupid money. $10 billion, something stupid. So there are these massive main players in the same way that there's Apple. They're these very, very large software providers, but ultimately there's still going to be, I think in this, because the internet is so well established at this point in time, as the LLMs are starting to take off, this is, people have been talking about it for much longer than we've been talking about it. But even still, we're at a place where the internet is already prolific and this technology is built on top of that. And so it's much more accessible to people. And the open source movement allows for it to actually sort of accelerate in a way that if it was just being done through one organization, the growth would be impressive and interesting, but much less large in scope. And so I think that by Llama, that's really just the thing that sort of stood out to me, is that LlamaIndex is allowing for that breadth of scope globally to be larger than if it was just OpenAI and Bard that have these proprietary large language models that they don't even tell you how many how many parameters there are, for example. Whereas with this, you can tailor it to your own. You can host it, on your own machine if that's the size of the model. You can, it allows for you to do. Is it called tailoring or fine tuning? Excuse me. Yeah. It allows for you to do a lot of those sorts of things in a way that doesn't require you going through some API that you have to pay for through OpenAI. Although it does obviously mean getting your hands dirty. So it's like, building the motorcycle from scratch versus going to the shop and buying the new 2023 off the lot. So there's pros and cons to both, and buying the one off the lot is going to be much easier, but it's going to mean going and having maintenance from the shop all the time. It's a lot less DIY. But as we've discussed at length, open source is cool. Without that, the competition's a little stifled. And so I think this just sort of stood out to me that it's interesting. When it comes to using LlamaIndex, I've not really dug into using it myself, just because what we're building is is not being built with this technology under the hood.
Yeah. Did you see the quote? Sam Altman did an interview, I think, with the Economic Times yesterday, or it came out
No.
this morning. But a guy they did a Q&A section, and this guy asked a question about, other teams building LLMs, if he thinks there's still room for it and things like that. And Sam's tweet, I'm going to butcher it, but was basically like, I should tell you that it would be silly for you to try to compete with us on LLMs, but still encourage you to try it. Like, and then he's like, but honestly, it's a pretty hopeless task to go toe to toe with us. Like, and the way I read it is like, the people at OpenAI have probably forgot about more things than regarding LLMs than most teams who are trying to build LLMs now. Like, they built one of the craziest, best, most well-versed teams in the industry. It's gonna be hard to catch up, but it is cool. Like, for people to have their own bespoke LLMs, if they really do build it out in a good way, where big institutions can feel like they don't have to worry about their data getting all going to one source. Pretty sweet.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like this, like an enterprise use case like this, and I think that's why IBM aligned themselves with Hugging Face, is because there's like this massive community there, and if they can just find some things that are ultimately going to be things that they can own, so they can use that IP, bring it in-house, augment it slightly, make it more secure for themselves, tailor it to their own use cases, built on top of Watson or built in tandem with Watson, things that they've already built. And obviously, Watson's something that predated all these like more recent LLMs, and then OpenAI has been around for almost 8 years. These guys have been building in the background. I remember like years ago looking at their job board, looking for any sort of BD or sales. It's like, and I realized years ago that sort of organization only hires researchers and really high level software engineers.
Yeah.
They have no interest in chatting with me, despite the fact that when you read Sam Altman's, he had put a post together. Maybe you had shared it with me, but I'd read it in the past, and it was just about like what every startup needs to sort of recognize, whatever founder needs to recognize. And it's like, one of the things is that every single job is really, at the end of the day, has a component of sales. And I think that that's a really healthy way to look at it. I think for a long time, I was sort of like shunning the idea that I work in sales, but ultimately business development and sales is such an integral part of life, let alone building a business and creating revenue. That, you don't want to be a one trick pony, but recognizing that sales is important, I think it was kind of a turning point for me.
Yeah, man, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm sure we'll talk about it more.
For sure.
Yeah, let's slide on into Product Hunt. I know you spent a bunch of hours just digging into what it is. Maybe give us a breakdown and then, tell us what you're seeing.
So like Product Hunt at a high level is a launchpad. So it's a launchpad for anybody to go in, and you don't need to have any sort of prerequisites other than the fact that your account has been around for 7 days. To launch something on Product Hunt. And Product Hunt is a cool website. I've used it, looked at it in the past. I've never launched anything there. Although we're looking at a few things in the near future. But what you effectively do is it's a community of folks. So it's kind of like Reddit, or it's kind of like any number of online communities, Facebook servers or whatever it might be, Instagram. But what you're doing here is you're ultimately showcasing a product. So you come out with the company, and then you do different launches if you want. Sometimes the company itself or the product itself just has one launch. And it's really sort of amorphous. There are a million things you could do there. So a lot of people, so what I've been doing recently is ultimately looking at, so Eric built Prompt Perfect, which is a plugin, was one of the first plugins that was in ChatGPT Plus. And now there are a lot more plugins, which is great, but there really aren't plugins that are serving the same purpose. A lot of them are sort of superfluous, and a lot of them don't really work. I've been testing a lot of those as well, but
yeah, it's nice to be one that's working. Thank God, dude.
Yes, it certainly is. You take it for granted sometimes, because a lot of the other ones just don't work that well. But nonetheless, but all that aside, none of them do the same thing either. So it's not like any of them are competing with Prompt Perfect, which is interesting. So the backend, I think, is it's worth like that. That's really cool in and of itself. But with Product Hunt, it could be a web app, it could be a Chrome extension, it could be a ChatGPT plugin. And so there's one ChatGPT, or there are two ChatGPT plugins that are listed. So I've been going through really just everything that's related to LLMs and prompt engineering and like automation of workflows and things like that on Product Hunt. I've gone through probably like 250 products in the last 2 days. Like I put like maybe 100 of them into a spreadsheet that were relevant for us. And if somebody really wants to see it, they can DM me or whatever, and we can talk about making you a copy. But nonetheless, there were some interesting trends. So the vast majority of these are just PDFs that people sell on, what's the name of that website you showed me? Gumroad. Yeah. Honestly, man, Gumroad is cool. I love the layout. Every single time I click on, even though they're like, pay $15 for this PDF, and I would never do that. It's kind of a cool layout of the website. I like the way that they built it. I don't know what they wrote that in, but I like that website a lot. I think it's cool looking, and they make it really easy to sell anything. Yeah. So there are a lot of them that are just like 100 prompts or 250 prompts. There are some that are 10 free prompts, 100 free prompts. Most of the clicking that I was doing the last couple of days are things that have launched in the last 6 months. There are a couple things in this same sort of vein that have been around for a little bit longer, but they're less robust, right? And like at the time, the comments that you saw in those, because when you launch something, the idea is that every single day there's a competition to be number one product that's listed. And over the course of the 7-day week, there's obviously days that are harder to be number one and days that are easier. So Saturday and Sunday, it's easier to be number one. There's less competition, but there's also a lot less people on the site looking at your stuff. So give and take there. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, there's a lot more people on the site, but there's a lot more competition because a lot more people are launching. So I think that there's a huge component of, if you have a good community on Twitter or on Facebook or anywhere, Snapchat, Twitter, any of these platforms. I said Twitter twice, but you know what I mean. You get your people to come on and upvote on product hunt, right? So the more upvotes you get, the more likely you are to be number one that day. And then you get to, like, there's this banner image you can put on your website, which you see a lot on relatively small projects. That's like a validation. I was number one on product hunt this day, or I was number two for the week this day, like this week. Like these are like very substantial sort of like badges of honor that organizations put on their websites. So there's, a lot to be said for that, but there's also a lot of people who go on there and they're hunters, are the title that they have themselves. So hunters are people who actually post these things, but then there are also a lot of people on there who just look at things that are posted and make comments, give feedback, product feedback in the comments. The vast majority of comments are silly. They're just like nothing. And they're just like people commenting for the sake of commenting, because I think that means that they get some sort of reputation point. I don't really know. But that to me is really dumb. Maybe they're like bots in some capacity. I hope that they're cracking down on that, because I did see that on a lot of these projects in the last 3 months, just a ton of comments that are nothing. And then a lot of the comments that are just nothing, the username is now deleted. Instead of being a username, it's just deleted. So, which is good. So they are coming down a little bit, I guess. But good. But yeah, so the vast majority of the projects are just like sort of all over the place. I'm just looking through through all my stuff. I mean, like there were a couple of them that stood out to me. Like there are a few aggregators that are kind of cool. So like there are a lot of websites who do this, and I think that some of them are just completely automated. But like there's an AI for that. Futurepedia, what the AITOTP tools. I don't know what that one is. I don't know how to say that one. I should say AIHABR. Chat AI apps just specifically for ChatGPT plugins. What plugin.ai, AI tools.fyi, AI of the day, AIGC magic. Like so many of these, and they're almost all identical. It's just variable in the number of users who actually use them. And Prompt Perfect is on the vast majority of these, which is pretty cool in and of itself. And I know that we didn't add it there, for example. So it's kind of cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're interesting. And I know firsthand how many. There's a lot of people using them, which is cool. I'm getting a lot
exactly,
of them, which is dope.
Yeah. And then just looking at the list, it's like 100 here. The ones that stood out to me were like the other ChatGPT plugins. One was a YouTube transcriber, which the plugin I couldn't get to work. It's called Show Notes. If you can get it to work, post a comment and let us know, because I used the web app, and the web app provided me with the transcript, which is cool. But I think they just pull that from the closed captioning that's automatically generated when you load to YouTube. So not all that impressive, but then for the most part, like exactly. And then the summary that it provided was honestly not all that impressive. And then when I tried to get a summary through ChatGPT using the plugin, it was complete nonsense. I tried it 3 times. All 3 times were nonsense. Just complete hallucinations of completely different. One of them, it was talking to Jane Goodall, not what we were talking about. And then the others were just like random people that I don't even know who was referencing. So that was the other ChatGPT plugin that I couldn't get to work. Sorry, I don't mean to throw shade. And then SpeechKey is another one. And SpeechKey's been around for a while. You're more familiar with them. They're based in Austin, but their plugin is also on Product Hunt. And I think that and before we record next week, you can expect to see another ChatGPT plugin on Product Hunt.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. Next week, maybe we'll talk about it. We'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
it'll be a fun. Yeah, it's cool. Product Hunt is an interesting place where people who like early stage products or experimental products can go and find them. If you're somebody who's starting a company or a product, you can put it there and actually get users, which is great. It's got one of those magical internet things where you can create something, put it out, and you have a chance to actually get a bunch of users. Yeah, it's dope.
There are a couple of people who had launched like ChatGPT on Telegram, ChatGPT Plus for Google Sheets. The thing is that a lot of the people using the name ChatGPT are not actually using the ChatGPT plugin. I'm sorry, not building on top of their API. And so ultimately there's copyright. There has to be something there, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you mentioned this being
they released brand guidelines 6 weeks ago that said you can't use the words chat or GPT and any other. Okay. They have like you're gonna get the cease and desist if you grow a business based on GPT. So there's about 1,000 projects that are all gonna have to pivot at some point. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that.
Okay, well,
if you're listening, if one of our listeners is building something with GPT in the name, go launch without GPT in the name, because
or just mix up the Google up the letters, like jumble up the letters, because every single one of these almost has a GPT in it, and it's like, granted, a lot of these are before 6 weeks, but even still, like, I mean, even if you're not building on the, I mean, I guess that there's something to be said for using sort of like the excitement of that name, but it sounds like it's against the rules.
Yeah, it's not going to work out in the long run.
Yeah, but some cool ones. There's an iMessage one that's called BFF, which is kind of funny. Yeah, there's a bunch of cool ones on the Product Hunt, but Product Hunt is cool. I followed a ton of people. I hadn't had an account. Maybe I did back in the day once, and like I voted once because somebody was launching something, but I usually just lurk there. So I created a new account a couple of days ago, went through all of these, followed a ton of people, followed like 300 people, and then I've had a bunch of followers coming in and been interacting more on some of the questions there, and just trying to garner a little bit of community. I know that you have a bunch of people on the newsletter who are excited about what you're building, and there are some other channels that we're using as well. But Product Hunt, I feel like these are some people who are pretty nerdy and pretty into this specific space. And so if you can find a niche audience for your niche product to start off with and get as much feedback as possible, I feel like there's no better place to start.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
So yeah, Product Hunt's cool. Yeah.
Fucking check it out if you haven't.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, that's 28 minutes somehow. I am shocked by that.
I know. Yeah. I think maybe we can put a habanero on this thing and spit out a hot take. I was just reaching for that one.
That's good.
Do you have a hot take for this week?
I think, yes. I want to give a shout out real quick to you. You put together a list of OpenAI employees to follow on Twitter. I thought that was cool. That's really helpful. I followed that list today. I think that's there's a lot of noise. So much of the time when I open up Twitter now, it's like the exact same thread 4 or 5 different times from 4 or 5 different people. And that's not fun or useful.
If I see the words ChatGPT is dead one more time, I'm going to be dead.
Yeah. So, but this is cool because these are all employees at OpenAI, and it's just cool to be a little bit closer to that. I think that's so. Shout out to you for that.
It's really cool too. If you can pin it and it'll show up on your home feed. So when you open up the Twitter app, it'll show and you can toggle over, and then your timeline is just the list, which is really cool.
Cool. Actually, I haven't tried that.
Yeah.
You sent it to me earlier today, so I appreciate that. Sure. My hot take this week was just that I feel as though there are some growth marketers who I just living on Product Hunt the last like 2 days and just like really diving deep into what it takes to launch there and what a good launch looks like and how you sort of garner a lot of attention from the launch when it happens. There are lots of different ways to do that. By having a big community of people, that's obviously the easiest, I think, most effective way to do it is by showing that you have intelligent takes on Twitter over the years. You launch a product with your following that you've garnered over that time. And then ultimately people follow you to Product Hunt and vote your thing. Like that's probably the best model, but ultimately that takes a lot of time and you have to be witty and Twitter's difficult and all this. You also have a great product. There are so many things that are just being launched. Like some of those lists that are on Gumroad, for example, they're not all that impressive. And then you see a lot of people who don't look to be bots, but they're just like there to post a comment for the sake of posting a comment.
Yeah.
I think I'm all for encouragement, and I love Reddit because you see the best and the worst in people in the same threads every day. If you would take enough time to look, and Reddit is like where I'm getting a lot of my information on Llama, for example. Like that's where I read about that, and that's how I'm keeping up on some of the open source stuff that's going on. And then there's a great subreddit, Chat GPT, which is not run by Open API, but there are millions of people in there, and it is so active. It's amazing. But nonetheless, on Product Hunt, it seems almost like a little bit of like some of the products that are really silly sort of have the same people responding with very sort of superfluous nothingness. And I just don't think that you're really generally contributing much if you're just there to post for the sake of posting. So I realize maybe it's not that cool a thing to say, but like if you don't have anything to say or any sort of product feedback, you probably shouldn't just post for the sake of it. And I probably won't ever have a hot take like that again. It's only because I've been in these comment forums for like
Yeah.
2 days nonstop for like until 2 a.m. It just gets a little frustrating.
Yeah, there's a bunch of that on so many different social platforms. Just like people trying to ride the wave of stuff and garner a following. You know,
Yeah,
that's the way it is.
exactly. That's why we see all these threads that are exactly the same. Chat
Yeah.
GPT has been dead, or another big week in AI. It's like, dude,
Mhm.
I only need one of these, maybe two. I don't need 100 of
Yeah,
the exact same thread.
I know. I see it as a positive sometimes, at least on Twitter, because if you actually have meaningful and interesting stuff to say and ways to say it, you will stick out. And that's like a very
That's a good
cool
point.
thing to be able to do. But, we need more we need more people with interesting ideas. That's why I created that
Yeah,
list for sure.
exactly. It's also, it harkens back to like crypto. It's like everybody and their mom is building an L2 or like an EVM compatible chain. It's like, well, we already have an EVM compatible chain. It's called Ethereum and it works great. What are we worried about? But that's that.
Nice.
What's your hot take?
My hot take, similar-ish. I've talked about it before for sure, but I listened to this founders podcast, and I've listened to multiple times now. There's three of them on John D. Rockefeller, and one of the big interesting things that I like for the AI space because we're so early, and you see all these people launching shit on Product Hunt or these GPT products, but most people don't realize. I think that to actually create a business with staying power that is a healthy business and a good one, you have to do certain things like build a brand. You have to survive. You have to last a really long time. You have to run at a really, really good. You have to run a really good budget. You can't just create a thing and be like, oh, we're gonna. You have to be really smart about the way you spend money, make money, price things, and you have to be consistent. And it's not really sexy. I think in AI, most people think things are going to be sexy and cool, but like a really good, well thought out, branded strategy and business could do extremely well in this space. And 99.9% of projects I see in the space aren't really doing that, which is, I mean, it's cool because we're building stuff in the space and we have an opportunity and to do things and build a really good base. And it's cool to see with the plugin how much traction it's already getting, and trying to transition that into something else is like crazy exciting to me. But I talked to a guy on last weekend who actually works in like hardware for AI for Amazon, and he was like, "Have you thought about like you could sell one of these things like we're selling for money?" And I was like, "This is such a new industry. Like this is the type of thing that you want to keep for 20 years, like I'm not worried about any of that. This is such a cool field. So much interesting things are happening, and it feels like there's quick little money grabs happening, but that's like the total wrong way to look at it. You should be trying to
Yeah.
build a little business that so you can have your own business for 20 years in the AI space because it's very
Is he trying to
possible.
recruit you to work on his team at Amazon? Is that what you're saying?
No, he was saying I should be interested in what an exit would look like. I was like, dude, I'm not even making
Oh,
any money from this right now. Why would I do that?
got
And
it.
it's
Got
like,
it.
yeah, it's
Understood.
also like I'm not interested in raising money either for something that's not even making money. Like, and nobody knows how big these sort of things can be right now. So, people's heads instantly go to like, I need to build this quick. I need to make quick cash and not worry about the longevity or future of it, or put as much thought into the foundation as if you're thinking about something you can have in 10 years. The idea
Mhm.
would be, I mean, if they keep plugins around, Prompt Perfect could be running for the next forever, which is awesome and amazing. It's like an asset.
Yeah, there's a newsletter. I've also been aggregating newsletters. There's like neural. something like Neuralink or something like that. I forget what it's
Yeah, it's
called.
not Neuralink, but it's Neuron
No.
AI or something.
Yes, yeah, I think that's it. They had put out a somebody had texted me this morning. I woke up to this text of a PDF they had put together. It was a link to somebody's being like, "Oh, click on this, and then you can have the high resolution version of this PDF." And it had the best GPT plugins, and Prompt Perfect was numero uno, my man. Did you see that?
Yeah, baby.
Yeah. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you. I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
forgot.
that's
Um, yeah, it's awesome. I think ultimately I'm really inspired by what you're saying. I couldn't agree more. I think that we've seen it because we've been lucky to work at startups and seen what does and doesn't work, and a lot more of what does work than doesn't work. We've been fortunate. But ultimately, it seems sort of like always seems so convoluted when you're one of like the many people at an organization that's 30 or 40 people, all the way to like 500, 600 people. It becomes abstracted. But working on it, you realize like, oh wow, like it's literally just a matter of doing it. It's just a
yeah,
matter of taking the time and like I don't usually like to look at product web that much and I read the comments. It's like we want to garner a following. You got to follow these people who are relevant, right? You just had it's a part of the process. Like suck it up and have some fun. Read through
yeah,
these things. See who's actually thoughtful. Like just do it. And so I think that that's the difference. No, it's cool. I love the idea that it's unsexy. Like that to me is like so
yeah,
many of these products are just like you can tell that they're cool because they're being launched on Product Hunt, which is great. But ultimately they are not being maintained. And so
yeah,
how do you have any longevity if you're not going to maintain the code base and you're
yeah,
just moving right on to the next thing? Like how do you expect to have any users at all? You know?
yeah. And why would you
So
not build something that you want to be around in 5 years? Like the goal, that should
yeah,
be the goal,
yeah,
which is,
I agree.
there's a hot take for you.
Love it. Cool.
Cool.
Awesome, man. Shout out to Josiah Soren
Yeah,
for
appreciate it.
sure. Yeah. All
And
right, man. We'll see you next week. Well done. You look great today, dude. You look great.
thanks, man. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
feeling
for sure.
healthier. I think the bike
Good.
rides are helping.
Love it. It's awesome. My man Eric hasn't taken a warm shower in how many months?
I don't know a lot, probably 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Yeah,
7 months because he's been waiting to make money from something specific that
yeah.
he's built. And we're getting really close.
I
My man is
know.
killing it. Yeah.
It
Those
is
cold
I do
showers
take
are
cold
adding up.
showers, so that should be out there on the
I'm
not that
sorry.
much.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's fair. Awesome, man. All right, cool. We'll see you next week. Ciao, ciao.